everybody, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. It's Champions League review time. My name is Taylor Rockwell, and what a week it was. It was somehow still tense and exciting, even though all the teams that won the first leg, with a combined goal difference of 10, managed to advance to the semifinal round. You wouldn't have thought that would be dramatic and exciting, but it was. Real Madrid, we're definitely going to find a way back into this one, but Bukayo Saka's late goal at the Bernabeu and the fact that Madrid only defended with like 5 players the whole game put this one out of reach. PSG demonstrated what happens when you start feeling yourself, throw Lucho's 400-page game plan out the window and wing it, as they held on for dear life as Aston Villa scored 3 unanswered and pushed them to the very end. Inter took advantage of their set pieces to eliminate Bayern Munich. Barcelona won by losing to set up their date in the semifinal round. So it's now Arsenal versus PSG, Barcelona versus Inter. Some very exciting fixtures to come. But first, some very interesting games to discuss. Graham Ruthven, no more Haaland, no more Bellingham, no more Mbappe, no more Salah or Vinny Jr., and most sadly of all, no more John McGinn. How are you on this strange, fine day?
I'm very well, Taylor. I am still mourning John McGinn's exit from the Champions League. He did his best. It was a real sort of Steven Gerrard in Istanbul sort of captain's performance with that goal and just getting that backside about the pitch with gleeful abandon. So I'm excited to talk about today's games. Are you excited to talk about the Champions League, Taylor? Or like the Villa Park DJ, do you actually wish this was the Europa League? Did you catch that before the game?
I did not.
So the players lined up for the anthem, the famous Champions League anthem. Wrong anthem played, Europa League music. Everyone very confused. Unai Emery, delighted. He's like, my time to shine.
I wish what happened actually is that they played that when Villa needed to come back from the 2-goal deficit. And they played the Europa League theme, and that's when Unai Emery realized he was Superman. Ripped off the shirt, and they got the 3 goals. Alas, it was not a comeback to be. Joe Lowry, Lamine Yamal can still win it all. As our resident young person, are you hoping that this plucky youngster is finally able to win something in his career?
No, just a dream come true for me. If Lamine Yamal absolutely gets that Champions League trophy, it would be a great moment. I think we talked about this last week. Our ideal final matchup of Barca PSG is still very much on the table. We always talk about how fun finals are going to be, and then we remember that they're never actually fun. But these games are fun. But maybe a PSG Barcelona game would actually be fun. I don't know that those teams can do anything else.
Yes, I don't think they can either. And hopefully we do get an interesting, entertaining final. But we did get some interesting, entertaining games. As I said, even with something like Arsenal getting the 3-0 win in the first leg, it felt, Graham, like there was still a chance Real Madrid could do something. At what point in this game did you start to think this wasn't going to be the case?
I think after the penalty gets overturned, right? I think there was a moment in this match, there was 2 moments for me. Up until the moment when the 2 teams walked out into the Bernabeu, I'd been very confident Arsenal are going to stroll this. I don't think Real Madrid have. This is a different Real Madrid team to past seasons. But then the intangible Real Madrid magic starts to kick in, and the Bernabeu, it looks incredible, and they've got the tifo, and there's almost like a cauldron, Colosseum quality to the Bernabeu where you're walking out from under the pitch, and I'm thinking, this is going to happen again. And then there was a period in the match where Saka has his penalty saved by Thibaut Courtois. Terrible penalty by Bukayo Saka. If there's one goalkeeper in the world you do not want to do a botched Panenka against, it's Thibaut Courtois, who is so big that he can be down on the ground and get a hand up and still save the penalty. And then there was a period where Real Madrid came forward in the other direction, and for a moment it looks like they've won a penalty of their own, which was never a penalty and was rightfully overturned. But in that moment I thought, is it happening again? So when the referee does overturn that penalty, I was appeased that it probably wasn't going to happen for Real Madrid, and it didn't. And it was just a very mature performance by Arsenal. Mikel Arteta wants control above all else from this team, and that's the word I would use to describe both performances in both legs. The only reason Real Madrid get on the board in this tie is because William Saliba is sleeping for a moment. Otherwise, they created almost nothing over the 2 legs.
That is very fair to say. They created almost nothing in this game, I think, because of the way Arsenal defended. Maybe some of their own inefficiencies, Real Madrid. But I enjoyed in moments where there was an 8-2-0 formation for Arsenal in defense. Sometimes it was a 7-1-2. But man, were they not shy about putting numbers behind the ball, Joe. But it worked, and worked pretty effectively, and seemed to really annoy Real Madrid at the same time. So a lot of birds being hit with one stone.
Yeah, the defensive solidity for Arsenal is a real calling card of theirs, and that's a huge reason why I do think they will pose a legit threat to PSG in the next round, because we've seen this team under Mikel Arteta, not just this year, but also in the past, be so effective and committed, Taylor. I love that observation of the wingers and even at times the center mids for this team stepping back into the back line to provide extra width to deny Real Madrid the chance to overload space out wide. Then as Real Madrid try to recycle the ball, they reform that actual 4-4-2 structure very quickly. This team's committed. Like you cannot be a player who doesn't want to play both ways and be in this Arsenal 11. They were excellent defensively for long stretches of this game. William Saliba, to zero in on him for a second, I had down in my notes, wow, William Saliba, amazing game. And then there is that gaffe on the Real Madrid goal. If we set that aside, I did think William Saliba did a very good job against Kylian Mbappe for long stretches here. In general, the commitment that he showed defensively and the strength and the patience, he's one of the best center backs in the world. And I think defensively this performance helped remind me of that. I do want to turn the table, though, a little bit, Taylor, because we've given Arsenal some credit here. Also, they had a 3-goal lead and did most of their work in the first leg, right? It's not like they needed a miraculously excellent performance to get a result here. Even with the mystique of the Bernabeu, they were almost always going to be fine in this game. And it's a credit to them that they were. But Real Madrid, for their part, I thought were downright poor in this game, especially in the attack. Yes, Arsenal defended very well, and no, Real Madrid were not likely to ever get back into this tie. But I want to read you a stat. Real Madrid attempted 43 crosses in this game. The last time they attempted more in a game was in La Liga, back in the 2018-19 season, when they attempted 44. This is from Yash on social media. This season, Real Madrid has lost 5 of 6 games where they attempted 25-plus crosses. So that's a credit to Arsenal in one sense for sitting so deep and being so effective with their defensive play that Real Madrid almost couldn't help but force it into the box. At the same time, there was some things that Real Madrid could have done to get the ball into better areas rather than just hoping for early crosses to find one runner in the box, to find at times 2 runners in the box. Their best threat, Real Madrid, in the 18 in terms of aerial service is Jude Bellingham. But the other unfortunate issue for them in this game is that Jude Bellingham was the only person that I spotted on the regular doing something different and trying to make little seam runs into the half spaces in beyond Arsenal's back line to get the ball into those Man City zones for cutbacks, right? Rather than just hopeful crosses into the box. There's a big difference in the effectiveness of a lofted cross to one hopeful runner in between 2 big-bodied center backs and working yourself carefully into the half spaces to a runner at the end line, Jude Bellingham in this case, because he did do it a couple of times in this game, to then play a cutback to a trailing weak side winger and Mbappe making that accent run. Real Madrid were so bland in their attacking approach in this game. They didn't seem to have ideas. And if there is a problem with Carlo Ancelotti's coaching style, it is this. It's that he doesn't drill those detailed final third patterns into his team. He lets them go out there and figure stuff out. And as it turns out, and this shouldn't surprise anybody, it's really hard to figure enough out over the course of a 90-minute game to claw you out of a 3-goal hole.
Yeah, I thought in this game, Joe, Real Madrid were really predictable in possession, and there's a real disconnect between the talent that forward line has, which on paper is enough to blow away any team in any game, and just how their midfield is incapable of playing into them in possession phases. I thought Dani Ceballos might start this game. I mentioned on the weekend review he came off the bench at the weekend against Alaves, and he has kind of, I think by accident, become the Toni Kroos of this team. And I thought there was a chance that Real Madrid would set up in a way to control as much of the ball in the opposition half as possible and just hope that through sheer pressure, Arsenal would buckle. But he comes on in the second half when the game is pretty much done at that point and Arsenal are in full control. So I never saw anything in this game. And in the first leg as well, we spoke about this last week, I never saw anything that suggested to me that this was going to be a Real Madrid comeback like we have seen in past years. And I take your point, Joe, about Arsenal doing the work in the first leg. I think that's factually correct. But we also saw Dortmund threaten a comeback against Barcelona. We saw Aston Villa threaten a comeback against PSG. So yes, Real Madrid were poor, but I think a lot of that was down to the way that Arsenal just essentially boxed them in. And that defence is so impressive. I mean, there was a moment, I'm glad that you highlighted Saliba, Joe, because I thought he was great as well, if we're putting aside that one gaffe. There was a moment in the first half when Mbappe, it was one of the few occasions when Mbappe was able to get one-on-one with Saliba inside the box. Saliba just completely, fathered him out of the pitch. He anticipates, not only does he play the situation, he plays the player because he knows that Mbappe wants to come onto his right foot. He anticipates it and he just muscles him out of play. And that sort of summed up a lot of what we saw from this game.
It's the one where he waits for Mbappe to take the touch, right? And then steps across and then shepherds it out. So not only, because so many other defenders get beaten by Mbappe there. So many other defenders turn that into a corner if they don't get beaten. For Saliba to basically recognize the exact situation, step across, and then have the physicality to hold off Mbappe and have that be a goal kick was like it was a tiny moment, Graham. It's one that I'm glad you spotlighted because for me, it is representative of how this game played out. Just Arsenal had that level of sharpness, had that level of belief, I think, and commitment to fight for every single inch and every single ball. And I had a concern going in for them. What happens if you concede one? If you're Arsenal, who have are so close to making it to the next round, who could kind of have this be a defining moment of their season, what happens if you concede a penalty in the first 10 minutes? Or what happens if maybe your game plan isn't working like fully effectively? Do you start to panic? Does some of that confidence start to wane? But we never saw that because there is the Saliba moment that you all have talked about that leads to the Vinicius goal. But outside of that, it just felt comprehensively like Arsenal locked things down and didn't give an inch, and Real Madrid did not have answers. Joe, I think you laid it out very well that Ancelotti, I think, a lot of times with Real Madrid can get by because they have the talent they do, but against a team that are defending like this, they didn't really have much of an answer.
Yeah.
Marca, I think, came in for Ancelotti the day after the game. Really critical of him. Do we feel like Ancelotti is going to be the one who's maybe the sacrificial lamb, Graham? Is Ancelotti going to get the blame for this?
Yeah, I'll put my neck on the line and say Ancelotti, this will be his final season at Real Madrid. I think that's been on the cards for a while. I even sort of think that had he won the Champions League, they might have framed it as Carlo Ancelotti's golden farewell. I think they're Florentino Perez is quite far down the path of wanting a new manager. There's been reports that they've already spoken to Xabi Alonso. Andoni Areola apparently has been spoken to as well. Very different managers there, which is the thing with Real Madrid. Not entirely sure they know what they want. But yes, it feels like this might be the end of this cycle for Carlo Ancelotti.
Kylian Mbappe is going to love playing for Areola. That's going to go super well. It's funny. I think this game in some ways reminds me of the importance of managers, yes, but also how overstated their impact does tend to be, right? I think Ancelotti, his calling card is that he lets the players play. And when you have a club that is as talented, a club with as many talented players as Real Madrid, then that tends to be fine, right? I mean, if Declan Rice doesn't bang in 2 free kick goals in the first leg, this whole series goes very differently. And in that way, Real Madrid, who have enjoyed these individual moments of brilliance in the Champions League for years and years, they got to taste their own medicine, right? They got Real Madrided in this game. That is in this tie, I should say. That is how I will always remember this double leg series. It is almost always Real Madrid who have those things happen for them and not to them. And Arsenal then were built for a second leg like this, and we've talked about that already. It was not Ancelotti's fault that Declan Rice went supernova in that first leg. And I think it is going to be really easy to build that narrative of, well, does Ancelotti's style not work anymore? Does Ancelotti's, has his magic worn off? And the reality is, there have always been these shortcomings to Ancelotti's style. And he's always relied on those moments of brilliance, but he is in the perfect setup, or has been, in the perfect setup to actually take advantage of those things. And his skill then, his biggest skill, which is, and has to be, at Real Madrid, in some ways managing that group of players and balancing the lineups and balancing rotations and keeping everybody happy enough that they can play competitive soccer together. That has always been enough. And when you get Real Madrid in the first leg of a 2-leg series, it's just not anymore. So, I don't think we're having this conversation, but I can already tell and have seen people have these big picture discussions about Ancelotti and his philosophy, and I think it's all a bit silly just because this has always been a possibility. If Real Madrid are in big holes against a team with a very good low block defense, they're going to be in trouble. Real Madrid are one of the greatest transition teams that we've ever seen. This version of Real Madrid specifically, with Mbappe, with Jude Bellingham making those crashing runs, with the wingers. This team is incredible in transition, and if you take that away from them, they're going to have problems, and that's exactly what happened in this series.
Yeah, Joe, going back to his time with Bayern, I mean, that's basically what happens. Ancelotti comes in after Pep Guardiola and is seen as sort of like a breath of fresh air. He takes some of the shackles off. He lets us kind of train the way we want to. There's a bit more fun in training. And then at a certain point, it becomes, well, now we need more direction. Now we need more preparation. And it seems kind of to be the way it goes with Ancelotti. So now I look forward to Xabi Alonso coming in and trying to get Mbappe to defend. Should be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing with Ancelotti, where I land with Ancelotti, is when the players are not the solution, he struggles, right? So I look at the way he used in this game Rodrigo, Vinicius, and Mbappe, and I have been banging this drum all season long against the best teams and the biggest occasions. That front line does not work. It's too top heavy. I do think there are ways that he might have been able to bring, again, this is a drum I've banged all season, but Brahim Diaz, I think, is someone who is a cohesion player, who, if you are struggling as Real Madrid to create an open play, maybe you do press a little bit higher and you make the press the creator in the team. But with a front line of Rodrigo, Vinicius and Mbappe, you're never going to be able to do that. So maybe it's just down to the fact that politically he isn't able to drop those players. That is a factor at Real Madrid. But in a coaching and football sense, when the players are not the solution, I struggle to believe that Ancelotti can come up with something to compensate for that.
Before we go, would either of you like to spend any time praising Mikel Arteta or any Arsenal players in particular, since we've spent a good little bit of time talking about Real Madrid's deficiencies? Any positives for Arsenal, Graham?
Huge positives for Arsenal. I think this is the culmination.
It's a bit of a loaded question, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is the culmination today of Arteta's time as Arsenal manager. I talked about the control. That's what he wants out of this team. He went into the lion's den of the reigning European champions against potentially the best player in the world, the player who was supposedly going to win the Ballon d'Or last season as well, in Vinicius Jr. and Jude Bellingham, and he tamed them. Obviously the players did it, but his approach, the way he's moulded that team in his own image, this is a Mikel Arteta team, and I put this much higher than I think until now. The FA Cup that he wins in his first season has been the biggest symbol of success that he's had as Arsenal manager. I think this is the symbol now. This is the thesis statement of what he wants this team to be. And even things like, Kai Havertz is out injured until the end of the season, so Arsenal don't have an orthodox centre forward. Kai Havertz isn't even an orthodox centre forward. But the way that he's used Mikel Merino over the last couple of months, I thought Merino had a good 2 legs. He scores in the first one, he gets an assist for the Saka goal here, and he does play an important role in that goal, where he is the one that withdraws off the defenders. He creates the space, Saka recognises it, he spins in, makes the run in behind and finishes. So even things like that, that's what I'm talking about with Ancelotti. He is incapable of finding those solutions, and Arteta, over the 2 games, I think found that he is capable of doing that.
Yeah, agreed. I think I agree with all that, Graham. I would have such a hard time if I'm Mikel Arteta pointing to a series where my team got lucky and scored 2 incredible free kick goals as like my crowning moment with my club. I understand the gravity of the moment, right? You're playing Real Madrid. You have to finish this series off. You're in the Champions League quarterfinals. Arsenal don't do well in this competition. I totally understand where you're coming from and the spirit of what you're saying. I think that Arsenal still have a lot left to prove in this competition.
Oh, totally.
I'm not saying that you would disagree with that, but man, like I can't overstate how different this all would have looked. And this is obvious thing to say, but if Rice doesn't score those, like that is the defining
100%.
moment. This isn't about, for me, this is what I'm trying to say. For me, this isn't about Mikel Arteta in almost any way. I think almost every team in the world would have approached this game against Real Madrid exactly how Arsenal did. Up 3-0 against Real Madrid, going away from home. Maybe not Barcelona, maybe not a few other teams. But
Pep would have had the man mark and pressed the whole pitch.
Yeah, we're putting Haaland in goal. Yeah, there's just, I don't think there's much to credit for. I understand at a macro level, this team did execute how Arteta has played, and this game was very much fitting in the theme of how Arteta has had his Arsenal teams play, where they are a little bit more compact and more defensive than some of the top teams in the world. But I'm so curious to look forward. Credit to Arsenal for what they accomplished here. But in some ways, this series just didn't end up being a test for them at all, because Declan Rice just found the cheat code. Like, he broke into the teacher's desk, found the answer key, wrote all the answers down, and then Arsenal didn't have anything to do for the last 120 minutes of this tie.
And I think Arteta would point to how they contained Real Madrid as the thesis statement. Not so much the
good job,
Declan Rice. But like other that
in
is
the
job,
first
like,
leg.
containing Real Madrid. Like I don't really understand that point. Like that is the success of Arteta's approach. They aren't the most, I've spoken about this before, in possession. I find Arsenal quite slow and a little bit boring to watch. But the way that they contain a Real Madrid team, and look, they've got issues, we've outlined them, but they're still a Real Madrid team that in a moment can produce something out of nothing with Kylian Mbappe and Bellingham and Rodrigo and Vinicius. And Arsenal gave them nothing over 180 minutes. That's the thesis statement. Arteta wants control. Yeah. So in a macro sense, I give Arteta huge credit. This team is very much playing the soccer that he envisaged a number of years ago, and he has moulded, together with Edu, who's now left as a sporting director, they have moulded a team in that image. And so I think his fingerprints are all over this team now.
If Barcelona did this, Joe would be more impressed. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
100%.
We're gonna take
You get
a break.
Lamine Yamal to defend for 180 minutes, and I respect that.
Beautiful. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about the rest of the Champions League games back soon. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. Let's move next to Inter's match versus Bayern, which they did eventually manage to get through, though they had a nervy moment with Harry Kane getting the opening goal in there. And Graham, I think that was a really interesting moment in the game, not just because there's the goal scored, obviously, but because until that point, I think it hadn't been the most captivating game, but I think that was because Inter were doing exactly what they wanted to do. And so that goal, I think for other teams, makes them panic, makes them sort of sit back or panic or stand off or whatever it might be. For Inter, it felt like they rose to the occasion, literally, with some good set-piece goals, but also it felt like that was when they sort of recognized backs against the wall, we got to make something happen, and they did go out and get 2 goals, so credit to them.
Yeah, it was a bit of a stalemate until that Kane goal at the start of the second half. It's also uncharacteristic from Inter in that I don't think it's great defending from DiMarco in that moment where he's just not close enough to Harry Kane, and Harry Kane just sticks it in the bottom corner. Harry Kane, by the way, didn't have a great quarter-final. I think there's a bit of criticism for him in Germany that has been building for
You're only
a few
saying
weeks.
this because Ryan isn't here. If Ryan weren't here,
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'll send this to him after we're finished. But he's been criticised for all season long. He's been criticised for his all-round game, which is unusual given that that used to be the Harry Kane thing. Was he was the best all-round centre forward in the world. I don't think Vincent Kompany's approach really gets the most out of him in that sense. He's also been criticised for, when it's been crunch time for this Bayern Munich team, him missing chances. So there was a response from him in this game. I know a lot of the media in Germany have focused on the opportunity that he blazes over the bar in stoppage time, which I personally find that very harsh. That wasn't a high percentage opportunity. But Inter were very impressive in the response that they made after going 1-0 down. And it does just make you think, well, how many gears does this Inter Milan team have? Because as you say, Taylor, until the Kane moment, this game is on their terms. This is the game that they want. They want to contain Bayern Munich. They know that by giving Bayern Munich a lot of the ball, they aren't necessarily giving them control of the match. And without Jamal Musiala over these 2 ties, I thought Bayern Munich really struggled without him for any kind of creativity or invention in the final third. But when they had to, they could really put Bayern Munich to the sword. And I know it's 2 set-piece goals, but some of the counter-attacking play that Inter put together over the 2 legs, but in this second leg, as we're talking about it now, was just incredible, where the execution is so quick. They're doing things at so much speed. It's one touch. They're getting from one end of the pitch to the other in like 5 or 6 seconds. So this Inter team are definitely more dangerous than I have given them credit for. I said that last week. They surprised me last week. They clearly got the job done here, and I think there's a chance that they are Barcelona, right? Who is the semi-final that they've got? It's PSG, Arsenal, and I think actually in both cases, I think Arsenal could be a bad matchup for PSG, and I think Inter could be potentially a bad matchup for Barcelona as well.
Yeah, so Inter. I was go ahead. You've been pretty positive about Inter from the jump.
Yeah,
I was trying to hype Napoli as a potential Scudetto winner. You're like, it's going to be Inter. We don't need to have this conversation. And you might end up being correct there. You might end up being correct that Inter could make a run at the Champions League as well.
Inter are a really good team, and I really enjoy watching this team play. You guys have already done a great job of detailing sort of some of the progression of this match. Bayern needing a goal, right? Needing to be on the front foot even away from home after the way the first leg ended back in Germany. Inter did fairly well withstanding some of that pressure. Now, to Bayern's credit, I thought they had some success early on pressing Inter, and it wasn't the sharpest game I've seen from Inter in terms of building out from the back and pushing their center backs forward into midfield and working their way with those intricate patterns to actually progress into the attacking half. But it also didn't need to be their sharpest game in that phase of play. Inter are a very well-rounded team where they have the defensive structure and the size and the defensive ability in their back 5 and the mobility in the front to be both a difficult team to break down and a dangerous team in transition. They have that. They also have, against a lot of teams, even though we didn't see it at its best in this game, the ability to be a very intricate team in possession. More than any of that stuff, though, in this game, we've already talked about how both of Inter's goals come from set pieces. They're a really dangerous team on set pieces. This is not a one-off thing. I mean, them scoring 2 goals in a game is not super repeatable from set pieces. But Ahmed Walid had a great piece of The Athletic on Inter's corner kick effectiveness so far this season. And there's a really useful chart in this piece. And along one axis is the expected goals per 100 corners. And then along the other axis is goals per 100 corners. and Inter are all the way in the top right of this. They're all the way almost maxed out on this chart where they're creating the most expected goals off of these corner kicks. And they're right up there. Fiorentina is the only other team level with them in terms of goals per 100 corners. And most of the corner kicks that they take, 57% of the corners they've taken this year in Serie A, are outswingers, which is a really high rate. And I tend to think in-swingers are a little bit more effective because you don't have to do quite as much to direct them on goal. But Inter have had so much success with their out-swinging corner kicks, and they did in this game. They were dangerous on set pieces. This is a well-rounded team. I don't think their ceiling is as high as any of the teams left in this competition. But man, they were good enough across two legs to beat a strong Bayern team, although Bayern, as Graham's talked about with Musiala in the past, not at their best in this series, and that obviously came back to bite them.
Yeah, I saw a fact about this Inter team after the game. It was on Match of the Day last night, which kind of blew my mind. So they have trailed for a total of 11 minutes in the Champions League this season, which is the lowest. Keep in mind, that's 8 league phase games, 2 last 16 games, and now. So we're talking 12 matches. They have trailed for 11 minutes, and it's the lowest of any team by a mile. Arsenal are like 70 minutes, and then there's another huge gap to the third team, and it's like 150 minutes. 11 minutes they've been behind for in the Champions League this season. So there's plenty to like about this Inter team in an attacking sense. Like Lautaro Martinez, it feels like, is finally having the season to make wider observers of European soccer kind of recognise how good he is. I think you ask anyone in Italy, they've recognised that for a number of seasons. But it feels like he's having a little bit of a breakout season in that regard, where he's scoring the big goals, and he is, because that's always been the criticism of Lautaro Martinez, right? Is that he's a bit of a Gonzalo Higuain in that sense, and when the moment comes, he spurns the opportunity. He is not doing that at all this season for their centre team. So there's plenty to like about the attack. I love Nicolo Barella. I think he's one of the best number 8s in world football. But that defensive record and that defensive solidity is just so valuable. We just talked about it for Arsenal, and that's the thing that, for me, makes Arsenal a genuine contender to win this whole competition. Equally for Inter, it's the thing that makes them so strong.
One other stat I really enjoyed, I can't remember if it was the last Champions League goal or the last goal that Benjamin Pavard scored. He scored for Bayern Munich against Inter, so I like that he's swung it back around, and now
symmetry.
Found the perfect symmetry there. Yeah, exactly. Let's keep it moving then, shall we? Let's talk about maybe another team that had kind of an off night. Barcelona, a team that did not have an off night, Joe, would be Borussia Dortmund, who get the win. Obviously not enough to advance to the next round, but where has this Dortmund been, is my question for you.
Yeah. I don't have an answer for that question, Taylor. This was the best Dortmund game I've seen in a really, really long time. Like, I don't know when the last time I've seen this team play where they put in a better performance than they did in this game against Barcelona. There's two sides to every coin. Well, there's more sides than that, but there's two sides to this particular coin, where Barcelona were just horrible in this game. Like, it looked like they just didn't turn up, and it's not like they were just lacking in effort and intensity. Those things can be a little bit harder to measure. They were just sloppy on the ball. Rafinha, for as good as he's been this season, where he's been, as much as I think Lamine Yamal is going to be maybe the best player in the world in 3 years, Rafinha's been their more consistent wide attacking option on the left. He was not sharp in this game at all. Passes going out of bounds. He had difficulties beating Nicolas Süle in 1v1s, which Süle is one of one in terms of his profile as a player in global football. Like, he's built different, literally. But Rafinha, I would kind of like that matchup on paper, and Süle is deceptively quick, I suppose.
He was one of the fastest players in the Bundesliga, I think.
It's
last
wild.
Year, Süle. It's so insane.
It is wild. Yeah,
and it also has a gut at times. I don't get it.
Yeah,
I don't.
He's a weird looking player.
It's so fun. I love watching Nicolas Süle play. But Rafinha has been excellent this year, and Süle shut him down. Like, it was bleak for long stretches of this for Barcelona, and that is a credit to Dortmund. I'm a bit bummed that they couldn't get back all the way to really make this thing a game. Barca winning 5-3 on aggregate after being up 4-0 in the first leg. I didn't expect this one to be a match where there was going to be some jeopardy, some imperilment involved, but there was, as it turns out.
Joe.
Yeah, when that second Dortmund goal goes in to make it 2-0, I really thought Barcelona were in trouble, because Dortmund had been getting in behind that fabled high defensive line all night long. They had Adeyemi with his pace getting forward. Girassi has looked sharp in the Champions League all season long. I think he's the top scorer in the competition now. Obviously his goals are capped, given that Dortmund are out. But 5 minutes after going 2-0 up, Benza Baini, scores that own goal, and the air was let out of the balloon after that in terms of competitive tension. But Dortmund were still the stronger team for basically the full period of this match. I thought Pedri coming on settled things down in midfield a little bit. I certainly thought he settled down Frenkie de Jong, who for the first 60 minutes of this game was incredibly sloppy. I think the Frenkie de Jong advocate on this show. Even I was watching his performance through my fingers on the sofa because he was really bad. But Pedri did settle things down a little bit. And I said, I made this point to Joe before we started recording with Barcelona. I don't make this point about many teams at the elite level because I just think with professional footballers, they go through their routines. They generally have some form of motivation for most matches. I thought this was complacent by Barcelona. I thought they thought that the job was done in the first leg, and ultimately it was, right? Yeah. If they aren't 4-0 up and after that first leg, they may be playing a different way. But yeah, they were relatively close to being stung in the second leg. That's how bad they were.
I think that was the type of performance I thought we could get from Arsenal. Not quite as complacent, but maybe just a bit more. We're pretty sure we've got this in the bag. We're going to come out and play our game. And I think the adjustments they made and the focus that they had were just lacking in Barcelona on the evening. They certainly didn't bring that level of intensity. But I also share the opinion that both of you seem to be espousing, which is that not great by Barcelona, but at the same time, we would assume in the next round they will be able to bring it and then some against Inter Milan.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what that matchup is going to look like because Dortmund in this game, I think the area that they had the most success was that they were very clear on what their advantage was against Barcelona, and that is an athletic advantage, right? Between Bayern and Adeyemi on the wings, flanking Guirassy in this game. The speed and directness at which Dortmund attacked and how purposeful they were building from the back to really find the opportunity to play through central midfield to then release the wingers. Barca struggled with that. And there was a moment in the 48th minute in this game that really, I don't know, didn't shock me so much, but I feel like was a really sharp summation of this game. It's Adeyemi on the wing, on the left side for Dortmund. He's just straight up faster than Jules Koundé in the 48th minute. And he gets a shot that's saved. But this whole sequence where Adeyemi's racing down, he just beats Koundé for pace. That sequence kicks off this whole series of shots that Dortmund have that eventually leads to that corner kick that Guirassy scores his second goal from. Like it was Dortmund going right at Barcelona and being aggressive and physical and quick and just faster than you. They knew, hey, we can outrun these guys if we can get into the open field. And Barcelona let teams attack in the open field more often than not because of how they defend under Hansi Flick. And I thought it was a legitimate credit to Dortmund, a team that I've been very critical of because I don't think they're a very good team, frankly. But man, they were very good in this game, and they took right advantage of the things that Barcelona struggle with. Inter, maybe not quite as capable of doing that. I know they've got some speed on the break, but it is an older team. It is a team that outside of the front two, I think could struggle a bit to take advantage of some of those same moments. And I know I said Inter were dangerous on the break earlier. They are, but in a different way than Dortmund, who I think are more route one and a little bit more track speed, and Inter are a little bit more precise in how they carve you open on the break. And we saw that at the end of the first leg against Bayern Munich. Man, Dortmund laid out a blueprint that other teams have already taken advantage of, but I thought it was interesting to see them be that searingly direct at times in this game, and Barcelona did not respond well.
All right, well, we'll see if Barcelona respond in the next round. We assume they will, but if they don't, we'll be back to discuss it. If they do, we'll be back to discuss it. For now, we're going to take a break, and then we'll be back to discuss our final game of this round, Aston Villa versus PSG. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. One more game to be discussed. It's Villa's win, but loss to PSG. A confusing one, made more confusing because I was not even planning to really pay attention to this game, if I'm being totally honest. I had it on. It was the primary game I was watching, but when it was 2-0 PSG, Graham, I thought, well, that's that. Good stuff, Villa. And then they scored one, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I won't turn it off yet. And then they just kind of kept scoring, and it felt, for all the world, in the 60th minute, like they're going to do this. They are going to find a way through, and they have so many chances. They come close so many different times. Ultimately, it was not meant to be. But this game was incredibly captivating, generally from start to finish.
Yeah, the game that we got in the end is a game that I wouldn't say I anticipated, but I thought there was a chance that we'd get a game like that in the second leg. But you're absolutely right, Taylor. When that goes 2-0, game looks done. And I'd actually started to pay more attention to the Dortmund-Barcelona game that we've just spoken about because it seemed like that's where the jeopardy was. I thought PSG were in complete control. And then all of a sudden they really weren't, and they were rocking by the end. And Villa pushed them so much harder than I thought they would when it went to 2-0. And had it not been for a moment or two, there's the Tielemans header that is saved by Donnarumma. There's the Maatsen volley right at the end, which is cleared off the line by William Pacho. Had it not been for one moment or two going PSG's way, Villa might have been the ones going through to the semi-finals, because I don't know if that game goes to extra time. It feels like the momentum is fully with Aston Villa at that point, and yeah, they might have been the favourites. But PSG just about grind it out. And to be honest, from my point of view, kind of pleased about that. I wanted an entertaining game in this second leg. We got an entertaining game, but ultimately I want the best teams going through to the latter rounds of the Champions League. And I still do believe, even after this game, that PSG are the best team in Europe, and I am hopeful that we will get that Barcelona PSG final, because that feels like that might be the final to buck the trend that Joe was talking about of the boring finals. I cannot see a way that game is not interesting, so I kind of want it at this point.
Yeah, and this game was so weird. This game was so weird. Taylor, you introed it well. Of PSG scored 2 goals, and you think, all right, that's pretty much done. And then Villa's first 2 goals of this game both come via deflections, like pretty notable ones, off of William Pacho, the PSG center back. How often do we see that happen in one game where there's 2 goals that are deflected, let alone off of the same player? And how drastically that seemed to swing the momentum of the crowd getting back into that game in an amazing way. Usually I'm very content to watch games from home because it makes watching all the games easier. There was some jealousy at not being in the... I mean, the crowd sounded just unreal and how that sort of seemed to sway some of this game, and I'm usually hesitant to dig into that stuff. But PSG in the second half the last 30 minutes or so of this game didn't really look like themselves. And that's a credit to Villa for how well they eventually absorbed and found space on the break. I thought they were going to break themselves after PSG started in the way that they did, with both fullbacks getting goals, really finding some joy attacking in behind Villa's back line, some sloppiness from Villa certainly in terms of how they controlled space. But to their credit, and to the credit of Lady Luck, there was a bit of a switch back towards Villa, and that made this game so much more fun.
Yeah, the issue for Villa in the first half, to my eye, was that Emery seemed to be committing more players forward to the press than usual, and that was leaving them exposed in the other direction. And for both PSG goals, Villa actually lose the ball in the opposition box, and then PSG are so quick to get attackers forward. Not just attackers, they get Hakimi and Nuno Mendes forward. The way that Lucho uses Nuno Mendes is absolutely incredible, where that second goal, he's in a centre-forward position, and then he finishes it like a centre-forward. He gets it quickly out of his feet, in off the post. It's just a brilliant goal from PSG. But the problem, and look, Lucho set up his team to play in that way. That's why he starts Bradley Barcola over Desiree Doué. So he kind of anticipates that in the first half. The second half, I thought Villa were much more effective at having a lower starting position in terms of where they were playing forward from, and that they were able to play Rashford into space, and they pushed Luca Digne high on the left, which then opens up space for John McGinn and Yuri Tielemans to charge through the middle. We saw that for the John McGinn goal, where he carries the ball 40 yards up the pitch, and the reason he's able to do that is because Luca Digne is positioned high on the left side, and so PSG are pinned, and there's nobody really to press John McGinn. Now, PSG were probably not expecting him to stick one in the back of the net from 25 yards out, and there's a tiny deflection on that shot as well, so a little bit of luck for Villa. But there was a change in the way that the game, in the game dynamic between the first and the second half, and Villa were able to stretch the pitch, and they played PSG at their own game from the first half. One thing that was confusing to me, so Unai Emery, I presume that was a bit of a tactical tweak from Emery. One thing that did confuse me were the changes that Emery made in the second half. Why does Marcus Rashford come off in this game? I felt like we finally had a player who looked like the Marcus Rashford of old. His work for the Ezri Konsa goal is the best thing I've seen Marcus Rashford do for like 3 seasons. And he was a threat from set pieces. He has that shot where he cuts in from the left side and he draws the save from Donnarumma. He was such a threat in the second half of this game, and then Emery takes him off. And I kind of felt like Villa lost a bit of momentum after that moment. So I feel like Emery will regret a couple of the changes that he made.
Do you have thoughts on why he did?
Not really, to be honest. No, I don't. I mean, Ollie Watkins, I guess, is also good, and it sort of give him a shot and see if he can. Maybe he's a bit more of a penalty box presence, right? So maybe with Villa being higher up the pitch, he thought he might convert something inside the box, a bit more of a penalty box poacher than Marcus Rashford. But yeah, Marcus Rashford was feeling himself in that second half. I would not have taken him off. I might have put on Watkins and Rashford as a 2 if you're anticipating having more penalty box opportunities, then getting Watkins on isn't a bad idea. But yeah, I thought that was a weird one from Emery.
I'm painfully choosing to believe that at halftime Rashford started talking about, like, I've been here before, we've been in the Champions League, like started referencing Manchester United, and Unai Emery just had to get that right out of the team. Can't get any references to this Manchester United in there. You never know how badly that could go for you. So in that way, probably a smart choice for him. Joe, any takeaways for you from this one?
I thought PSG had a sort of hot and cold evening, and I think that's pretty evident from how the game actually progressed. But one of the moments that really stood out to me in that way is the Nuno Mendes goal, where PSG, and I put this down in the doc, they're so difficult to press because of how fluid they are at moving off the ball and how many players are comfortable receiving in tight spots in this team. I know that in and of itself doesn't make them unique relative to the best in the world, but even when they're up against a man-oriented press like Villa showed, especially early on in this game, Villa were quite aggressive, really in the first 10 minutes or so. They were trying to get up and press PSG. But even when Villa thought that they had matched up man for man to deny that double pivot of Vitinha and John Neves that they were building with in this game, even when Villa pressed to deny those players, then Fabian Ruiz drops in. And then when Kamara goes with Ruiz, then Dembele drops in for the 9 spot. And if a center back goes with Dembele, then Kvaratskhelia drops in. And it's just one wave after the next for PSG, and that's why it's so hard to accurately press them. And Villa, to their credit, had some success disrupting what PSG wanted to do on the ball in this game. But on that Nuno Mendes goal, and both of PSG's goals were real emotional swings, right? On that Nuno Mendes goal, it's nearly a turnover for PSG in their own box. But then you blink, and it's an up, back, and through, and it's PSG running in behind, the ball over to Mendes, and Mendes finishes. And it's at that point, it feels like game over, even though it really wasn't quite that. The first goal for PSG in this game was another heart and mouth moment for Villa, where it's Martinez come out to claim the ball in the box and just botches it. Like, that's a huge moment in this game. That is a defining moment of how this second leg progresses for Aston Villa at home. And that is a part of the death blow for this Villa team. So PSG are a team that can push you to your limits, and they did that and a little bit more in the case of this game against Villa. But man, every time I watch this Luis Enrique team, it's not that they're perfect, and they certainly were not perfect in this game. They are also a bit unfortunate in this game. I believe that pretty strongly. But man, the way that they can carve through you and take you from a moment where you think you've won to a moment where you know you've lost is really special.
2 things for me. One, I think Emi Martinez might be the most expressive goalkeeper in the world.
Yeah.
I love how when he does something well, we know about it. When he does something bad, he makes the most like little kid caught face. That it's just my favorite thing. He is constant entertainment and did make this game more fun. I also alluded to it in the introduction, but I kind of felt like this was PSG sort of being like, we're 2-0 up, whatever. Let's just kind of throw caution to the wind and do what we want to do. And I mean, I'm not trying to dismiss anything that Villa did, but it felt like I have to believe Unai Emery lost his mind at full time, even with a win, even with the fact that they ended up getting the result, not the win, but advancing to the semifinal. But the way they did not look at times like an Unai Emery team, or the way they weren't able to just sort of killed this game off as efficiently and effectively as he would have wanted. He is very much a manager who wants control, wants his teams to play a certain way, wants his players to respond accordingly. That they did not, I'm going to guess, did not fill him with joy. But I think that can be a very useful lesson to learn when you still get to advance. You don't play well or as well as you would like, but you still get to go to the next round. So now you've kind of learned, hey, you've got to stick with it. You've got to go with the plan no matter what. We kind of can't lose our focus. Again, looking at Arsenal, I think that Arsenal teams of the past might have lost their focus, might have been feeling themselves a bit too much and could have run into some problems. PSG ran into some problems, overcame them in the end. So I think can take away some positives from this one in an otherwise maybe slightly forgettable performance for them.
He was very positive afterwards, Lucho. Actually, I mean, obviously he might have been very different. Yeah, exactly. He might have been very different in the locker room. But to the media, he was kind of saying that if you're going to win a Champions League, you have to come through occasions like this where you're kind of back to the wall. Maybe luck is on your side, and there was praise going both ways. John McGinn afterwards said that this was the best team that he had ever played against. So even as a Villa player, where they must have felt like they were on top for large periods of this game, I think if you're on the pitch and certainly in the middle of that midfield like John McGinn was, where you're up against Neves and Vitinha and Fabian Ruiz, which I still think is the best midfield in world football at the moment, must feel like being put in the washing machine. So it was as I said at the start of the segment, I got exactly what I wanted out of this game, where this was really entertaining. It was compelling stuff. There was that little moment where you thought Villa might get it done, but ultimately the team that I enjoy watching the most goes through to the semi-finals, and that's PSG.
Truly, this was the game both times that I thought, yeah, I guess I'll watch that one. I don't know what's going to happen here, especially in the second leg, and it ended up being the one that I found the most engaging by both teams, because as we've talked about with Real Madrid, for example, it didn't feel like they really had a way back into that one or were capable of finding one. Villa certainly got some goals and certainly played well, but as we saw in the first leg, PSG can just punish you. Any little mistakes, they are so efficient in their counterattack, so effective and speedy in the way they attack, and can just do what you are trying to do better in so many different ways. It's still PSG for me. I still think that they end up winning this whole thing. Still many games to be played. Do either of you have a feeling one way or the other about which team emerges victorious in the end?
I'm going to stay consistent. I still think, even after this game, having watched it contrasted against the Dortmund game that Barcelona played, I still think PSG give you fewer opportunities than Barcelona on the whole. By the way, PSG are more consistent in making the semi-finals of the Champions League than you would believe. They've made the semi-finals of the Champions League in 4 of the last 6 seasons now. The 2 seasons that they didn't were the 2 seasons where they had the front line of Mbappe, Messi, and Neymar. So I just love that this narrative about this team, that this is truly a reflection of what Luis Enrique wants from a team, and it's also a reflection of what PSG have decided post Mbappe. What they want to be. They want to be young and hungry. They want to have homegrown players. I think it's come to fruition more quickly than a lot of people would have envisaged. And I think Barcelona are once again a reflection of what they want to be as a club. There are a lot of those things as well. Young, hungry, homegrown. I think Arsenal are a team that are young, hungry, homegrown in a sense. So there's a theme here. Like if you're Real Madrid and you're looking for a new manager, there are teams to look at in the Champions League this season and lessons to be learned, and how the whole of the team is going to bring you more success than just a collection of individuals. And PSG seem to have learned that lesson now. So I think they'll win the whole thing.
Barcelona want to be a team that's dropping $1 billion on other players' release clauses, but they've spent themselves sick that they have to be young, hungry, and homegrown. Okay, I think I agree that PSG are probably the best team in this competition. I want to ask you both, if I give you the choice between taking PSG as the winner or taking the field, which in this case would be Barcelona, it would be Inter, and it would be Arsenal, do you feel so strongly, Graham Ruthven, about PSG that you would give me the field? And I'll ask you the same question, Taylor, in a second. Graham's thinking. He's got his thinking face on.
I said earlier, I think Arsenal are potentially a bad matchup for PSG. Of all the teams left in this competition, Arsenal are going to be, well, it's all the stuff that we saw against Real Madrid, right, where they're going to use a low block for a lot of the game. They're defensively sound, and against a team who is best when they have open space to attack in PSG. So I'll give you the field. I'll back myself here. I'll say PSG. Yeah, I feel relatively strongly that they're the best team in this competition.
Okay, Taylor?
I will go the other way. I would say that if right now, I think Arsenal, for what we saw them do to Real Madrid, they could certainly do to PSG. Yeah, I think it could be a harder task to do that against PSG, as strange as that feels to say out loud. But I think Arsenal have proven themselves to be more than capable of causing problems, and I think Barcelona and Inter could both do the exact same thing, whoever gets out of that one. So I wouldn't say I'm fully committed to PSG winning the whole thing. I will say they have a lot of the feel facts about them. I think that's a Stephen Colbert line. But there's just so many things that feel like a team that is going to win the Champions League, where you have them be likable in a way that PSG teams never have been before, that you remove a lot of those names that I think kind of weighed them down, both in terms of expectation, but also in terms of actual on-field performance. But even a result like this, where they're still getting praised by opposition players, as Graham mentioned, but also had to be reminded that this isn't, you're not anointed. It's not going to be handed to you. You have to earn it. You have to work your way through. I just think a lot of it's a stars aligning sort of campaign in my mind for PSG. So there's some emotionality to my feeling that they will win the whole thing. But if you force me to go with reasoned analysis and looking at tactics, it could be any one of these teams, which I think makes for really fascinating semifinals. There's no team that feels like, they're just happy to be here. All of them, I think, are very happy to be here, but would also be very happy to continue to go on.
Four different countries as well, which is the symmetry of that is very satisfying. I don't think that's happened since 2017. So I like the way that this tournament has panned out. I'm very much looking forward to those semifinals.
It made writing introductory jokes difficult, I'm not going to lie, because England, France, Spain, and Italy, like, there's a lot of history there. But I don't know. It's tough to be like, it's all World War II. It's all World War One. It's all, I don't know what we're doing here. Let's just avoid
Some
World
sort of
Wars altogether.
It's the war in our hearts.
I thought that was just the war over Nando's for you, Graham.
That's true. Yeah, that's what we should call it. Yeah. Joe and I are fighting the war over Nando's
We are.
constantly.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but it happened.
Ooh, unfortunately, I'm coming on the side of the Allies, the good guys, which is Joe's opinion. Sorry, Graham, you're the Axis now. That's awkward for you.
I keep getting told as a Brit that I am anti-sauce, and then I come to you with a saucy casual dining place, and it gets thrown back in my face.
A saucy casual dining place. Graham doing some advertising for Nando's as we conclude this Champions League review. Thank you for that, Graham. And thank you for all of your analysis, wit, and wisdom today.
Thank you, Taylor Rockwell.
Joe Lowry, Team Allies, thank you for everything you bring to the table, including your skepticism of Nando's.
Woot woot. Thanks, Taylor. It's our allied cry, by the way.
That's fair. Listeners, thank you all very much for listening and supporting, and we'll talk to you all again very soon.